also to the you can unmute yourself and ask a question. I think we'll have kind of little sections where students will be able to ask and answer questions throughout the presentation. So welcome, and I hope you enjoy the presentations. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you, Sandra. Thank you guys for all joining us this afternoon. It's always kind of a mystery, like, it's 3 o'clock. Are people going to really want to hop on here or not? But I'm glad that you guys did, because this is a really important presentation. And it's for me, I wish when I was coming here, I knew about scholarships. I did not earn any scholarship when I was during my time here. I graduated in 2007. My name is Tony Rosales, by the way. I'm the scholarship coordinator here. This is my 10th year at the college, and the last 5 of which has been doing this job. And I love it because, you know, during the quarter, you come across some students that are struggling financially, and, you know, come to find out they don't have anything but the regular, you know, the Pell Grant, which is great, the Washington College Grant, which is great, but there's, you know, always, you know, a need for more, especially if you're attending full time. When I was coming here, I was a full-time student. I did 40 hours a week after school and got hardly any sleep. And it would have been nice to have, you know, gotten some scholarships. But hopefully you guys are confident when we're done with this presentation about applying, because I know applications, that word is kind of, you know, like, oh, it sounds really stressful, but it's not that bad. So let's begin. Let me get this going. So today we're going to go over a general overview about scholarships. We'll also go over the application. I'm going to walk you through it and the process. We'll explain that. We'll also talk about scholarships outside of WVC, which there is lots of. And then we're going to go over some tips. So, and at any point in this presentation, you want to just ask. I know sometimes it's kind of like, should I stop and ask a question? Feel free to do that. But if you're not comfortable doing that, obviously type it in the chat, and we'll have a question and answer portion at the very end. So what is a scholarship? So it's a grant or a payment made to support a student's education. You do have to be enrolled as a student. I think every year I get at least one student ask, hey, I got awarded a scholarship this year. I'm not going to be attending. Can I still get it? Well, the answer to that is no, because it's meant to support your education. It's meant for tuition, meant for whatever you need while you're attending school. And so some of them even have a criteria and a requirement of you having to be full time. So it is meant for your student, your education. And you're awarded on like a wide range of different things. So it could be academics, you know, high GPA. It could be, you know, your performance on the field if you're an athlete. It could be your performance out in the community with community service. So it could be a wide range of things. Every year we get somewhere between 300 to 350 applications. So usually we don't go over 350. That seems to be our stopping point for some reason. But we award anywhere from 100 to 130 students, definitely over 100 students. So for those of you that are good with math, the pretty good odds, I would say, you know, 1 in every 3 students will get awarded. And then the awards, they vary anywhere from $500 to $7,000. There's been a couple of years where we had scholarships that are worth that much, and it's awesome to award those, because that's a lot of money, and that's more than a Pell Grant. So think about that. And you can be awarded multiple scholarships. So if you're awarded, I don't know, a one $500 scholarship, that's great, but you might get awarded another one. So just, you know, be patient. And some of our scholarships are renewable. Many of them actually are renewable. The only thing you have to do every year is apply. So the same application that we're going to walk through today is the same one you're going to need to apply to get them renewed. And basically, it's going to be, you're going to have first dibs on those scholarships that you were already awarded. So In the past, we've had like extra applications and that we hardly got them back. So this kind of simplifies it. Does someone have a question?
Yeah, so for those renewable scholarships, does that apply to, you say you're transferring from a 2-year to a 4-year? Or does that just
Well,
carry over when you're in
I'll
the,
touch on that, but they are meant only for WVC students. So yeah, good question though, but we'll talk a little bit more about that. Where can you find the application? That's going to be online, of course, wvc.awardspring.com. That's where you're going to find it. And you'll see here the deadline is Sunday, January 9th. And so that means the application is open right now. And this is a special run, a special application period. It's for winter of 2022. So that's next quarter winter. So we usually don't do this. This is actually our first time that we're doing a winter application. So during the fall, we've done like a fall application the last 3, maybe 4 years to kind of catch those students that, you know, during the summer, they decided, oh, I want to attend college. Is there anything available for me? It's to catch those students, those latecomers, those late, I guess, decision makers. And so we've got some extra funding available, and the application will be closed January 9th. And then once that one's done, we're hoping about the end of January, we'll have all those awarded and everyone all notified. So, but then when that's done, then there's another application. This one's the regular one. So this one's going to be the big one where we have like 66 different donors and over 100 applications available. And this is going to be for next school year. So the 2022-2023 school year. And so that one, it'll depend on how quickly we get done with this current cycle, but we're hoping to open that up somewhere at the beginning of February, maybe mid-February. I'll be sending out a mass email to all the students letting you all know when it's open. So check your student emails. And then the foundation told me they'll probably close it somewhere beginning to mid-March. So you'll have a good month to get that application done, which may not seem like a whole lot of time, but usually when we open it up, it's like November through February, and everyone applies in January. So, oh, I meant to check to see how many had turned in an application for this current application period, but I didn't do that. And so for this one that we'll be doing for next school year, that's going to be for fall 2022, winter 2023, and spring 2023. So that might be like a long ways away, you think, but that's just next school year. And yeah, those are some crazy looking numbers. But when you go on AwardSpring, this is what you'll see. For those of you that have applied in the past, just log into this website using your email, whatever one you registered, and then your password. If you forgot your password because it's been several months since you did it, just hit the forgot password button and you can reset it. But for those of you that this is going to be your first time doing the application, click on the register button, and it's really easy. So it's just going to ask this stuff. So your email address, so it doesn't have to be your WVC email. It could be your Gmail or Hotmail or whatever. Just whichever one you prefer, it doesn't matter. And then obviously your name, create a password, and then you hit the create account button, and then you're in. And I wrote on here, write down your login info. Sometimes that's helpful. Don't write it, like in the front of your binder where everyone can see it, obviously, but it's helpful sometimes. So when you get in there, to the left there, you can see there's a dashboard button. So that's where you're going to see if you were awarded a scholarship. It's going to show you how many you applied for, and I'll show you a little further ahead what that looks like. Also, you can click on all the scholarships that we are awarding for that particular cycle, and then obviously the application. So as you can see, the application has about 7 different sections to it, and we'll go over each section here. So it's all basic info for the first part of it, which probably take you, I don't know, anywhere from 5 to 10 minutes. The first section is your date of birth, your email address again, and then your physical address, things like that. And then the second section is going to be asking about your academic information. So like your high school, your college plans, things like that. And the third section is going to be really simple. Did you file a FAFSA or a WASFA? And then there's a qualification section. So this one here is really meant for us, for awarding accuracy, making sure that, you know, we award the students that those scholarships are meant for. So we've got scholarships for athletes. We've got scholarships for students that have kids, for veterans, for a huge range, tree fruit, horticulture. And so we want to make sure that when you answer these questions that you're that you tell us exactly what you're going to do, because it'll pull you into these particular scholarships. The next section will obviously take the most time. It's the essay section. So it's going to consist of 6 different short answer questions, and each has a word limit of 100 words. So that doesn't mean just do 1 sentence, because you're not going to do yourself any good just writing 1 sentence. Try to get up almost to 100. You don't have to hit 100, or don't ramble or anything like that, but spend as much time as you can on these sections, because it's gonna that's how you're going to be scored. What kinds of questions? So leadership contributions, questions about dealing with adversity, your commitment to your goals, things like that. And these are, we changed the questions to fit more of what you would see at a university. So it's a good practice for those of you that are going to go to, like, say Central or whatever after this. They're going to ask kind of the same types of questions. So once you've completed the application, AwardSpring will tell you, hey, you did it, nothing left to complete, way to go. And if for whatever reason you hit the submit button at the very end and you left a blank, there's going to be a number. I wonder if you can see my mouse right here. It'll tell you items requiring completion. It'll give you a number there. And all you have to do is just click on that button and it'll take you right to that spot and just answer the question or questions that you left blank. For this particular one, you can see there's no items requiring completion. So this particular student, they qualified for 14 different scholarships. So what's cool is AwardSpring, based on your answers, is going to pull you into those scholarships, and you don't have to do any extra work or anything like that. Just answer the questions. And so when you click on the applied scholarships button, it'll give you all the ones that you qualified for. So if you click on each one, you can explore, you know, each one there. It's going to give you an overview, the qualifications, and then some quick facts like how much it's worth. Right now, I believe they've updated all the award amounts. If you don't see it on there, eventually you'll see it on there. So yeah, we try to keep that as up to date as possible. So you've submitted it, you've done everything. What happens after that? Well, once the cycle is completed, so once the scholarships are closed, then the rating period begins. And so we've got a scholarship review committee that does all the rating. And this consists of like faculty, some staff. So it's people from both campuses, actually, from Wenatchee and OMEC. So that's really cool that we can get, you know, as many people within the college to help out with this. And each application will get rated by 2 different committee members. And what AwardSpring will do is the committee member will score your application, and then AwardSpring will score the average. You get the average, and then they'll rate you kind of rank you with that score. And so obviously the highest scores get awarded first. Sometimes that's not the case because they're trying to look for a particular student and they have to read the essays to find that particular student. So that's why I'm saying make sure that you're very clear on those essays about your goals and your future and things like that. And over here, I wrote down that applicants will receive selection notifications no later than July of 2022. That's for the big cycle. For this, the one that's open right now, like I was saying earlier, we're hoping to get all those notifications sent out before the end of January. So that's tomorrow's December. So if this was tomorrow, I could say next month. And so but for the big application, we typically send out notifications. We try early April, early to mid-April, so the beginning of spring quarter, basically. And it just depends on when this current cycle is going to be over. So maybe May, I don't know, but definitely during spring quarter before the school year's over, you're going to know whether you were awarded a scholarship or not. And those notifications are sent to the email accounts that you registered through AwardSpring. So make sure you check that. Here's some things to keep in mind. Students don't need to apply for specific scholarships. Like I said before, our scholarships are not transferable. We kind of discussed that a little bit. So if you are planning to attend, let's say next fall, and you're graduating at the end of fall and you were awarded a scholarship, you're only going to get it for fall quarter. And it's because it's meant just for WVC students. So that has actually helped us save some money for students that are currently attending. That's why we have this winter cycle, this winter scholarship cycle, and the fall one, because we have some extra leftovers that some students, they graduated and they said, hey, I'm actually not coming back. And so we re-award them. And so it's been really handy to do this. And scholarships are awarded for one academic year usually. So that would be fall, winter, and spring. So if you're awarded a $3,000 scholarship, all 3,000 isn't going to go towards fall. It's going to go 1,000 fall, 1,000 winter, 1,000 spring. And then when you're done with our application, start looking for scholarships outside of WVC, because especially during winter quarter, that's when like all the applications are open. And so there's just a humongous range of scholarships, especially our area in Central Washington. We've got so many donors and so many different Rotary clubs. It's crazy. I get scholarship checks from Stamilt, from Crunch Pack, Dovex, Confluence Health Foundation, for those of you that are in nursing, Lakeshland Health and Wellness Foundation. We've even got some from McDonald's and Taco Bell. So I think you have to be an employee, but for those of you that work in those places, there's scholarships for you too. So, I mean, they're everywhere. Another great one to highlight is on the left or on the right column right here, the Washington State Opportunity Scholarship. They are really great because they follow you. So you can get awarded from them and you can get your scholarship every year until you get your bachelor's degree. So that's really, really cool because that's, I mean, that's kind of guaranteed with an easy renewal. So they're really great. Another one I wanted to highlight is the Community Foundation of North Central Washington. They have a really generous organization, and it's really awesome because I think we get practically half of our scholarship funds are from them. And so they raise a whole lot of money throughout the year, and it's all for you students. So I would definitely check them out.
If we just Google these, we'll be able to locate them, or is there like a link somewhere?
Yeah. Oh yeah, I didn't put a link on here. So for the Community Foundation of North Central Washington, that one's just simply cfncw.org. And then the Washington State Opportunity Scholarship, I think that one is WashingtonStateOpportunity.org, something like that.
That's
And
what I
then the Washington Apple Education Foundation is another one. It's just waef.org. But that one, you have to have had experience working in orchards or your parents. So that one's a little more strict with their criteria, but they've got a lot of funding too for our students. And
Thank you.
they'll send a check. You're welcome. And they'll send a check with like, hey, here's I don't know, $20,000 for 15 students. And it's like, oh, wow, that's great. Just like that, bam, 15 students are awarded. So, and most of the applications, like I said, are winter quarter is the time when they're all open. By the time you get to spring, if you're looking for scholarships, you're going to be really pushing it because most of the applications will be closed at that time. And that's when these donors are making their selection during the spring quarter and then sending out notifications to students during that time. And then during the summer, they'll send us the checks for those students. So early spring, most of them are closed. Some tips: file a FAFSA. Some of these scholarships, they are quote need-based, and so they don't know your financial need if you haven't filed a FAFSA. So it's a good idea to file one, even if you don't think you're gonna qualify for anything, you might qualify for something. Follow directions carefully. So if a donor wants an official transcript, make sure it's an official and not an unofficial. If they want 3 reference letters, make sure it's all 3 and not 2, or I wouldn't even give them 4. Just do what they tell you. So include everything. And then describe yourself and your educational goals. So consider this your interview, because pretty much this is going to be the only way a donor is going to ever really meet you, maybe, possibly. Some of them, they like to meet their recipients, but consider this your interview. Stay on topic. Definitely answer the questions. We've had some really good essays from students, but you know, when it comes down to actually scoring them, some of them will not even answer the questions. So like if there's 2 parts to the question, make sure you answer both pieces and you include that. And so you can lose a lot of points when you just kind of go off topic. So make sure you stay on topic and answer their questions and take your time. There's no rush. Don't wait till the last minute, obviously, because then that is a rush. But take your time. And then make copies of your reference letters, those recommendation letters, for those scholarships that require that. I know it can be really stressful for students to ask that. It's kind of intimidating. So like, hey, can you write me a letter of recommendation? Yeah, that can be pretty stressful in itself. So save yourself the time and just make some copies of those letters when you get them. And we're not actually requiring them anymore. We stopped doing that a couple years ago. And so that's kind of easier for you guys. So turn your application before the deadline. Don't be, you know, January 9th stressing like, oh, I need to do the application and just kind of throw something out there. Take your time, because I mean, some of these scholarships are worth a lot of money, and I'd hate for you guys to, you know, not get awarded because you didn't take the time and turn in your application. I had one student that actually turned in, asked, hey, I didn't get notified whether I was awarded or not. And I'm like, well, that's weird. Usually we send the notification whether you've been denied or not. And so I looked and I was like, oh, wow, we didn't send one, because AwardSpring keeps record of them. And I'm like, I wonder why. That's really odd. We usually do that. And I looked and she hadn't even submitted the applications. It was incomplete. So turn in your application before the deadline and double check it too. And then search locally. I know the national ones can be really enticing, you know, $10,000 for a scholarship, but think that's $10,000, but you might have 10,000 students applying. So your best bet is going to be our local ones. We've even had some donors stop by our office. There was one donor in particular who said, hey, I need some help. I haven't gotten one application in 3 years. And this was for a nursing student. And we've got lots of nursing students here. So I went out then, I sent the email to all the students letting them know. I posted the physical application out in our hallway. And a few months later, we got the check for a student that got awarded. So that was really cool. Finally, they got an applicant, obviously. Some additional tips: proofread. AwardSpring, if you type in your essays in AwardSpring, there's no autocorrect. There's no, anything to tell you whether it's right or it makes sense or not. So I recommend you write your essays on like a Word document, a Google Doc somewhere, and just copy and paste it, because you're going to get those annoying little squiggly lines while you're writing and be like, what's up with that? I hate those things, but hey, if it makes it sound better, it's just there to help you. So definitely do it on a Word or Google Doc and just copy and paste it. There was one year where we got a student that had handwritten, this was back when we were doing handwritten applications still, and they should have used spell check or something, but there was it was like there was 2 sentences with only 1 period, and there was a U instead of YOU for you, and it was just like all jumbled up and all over the place. I'm like, oh man. And he turned it in and walked off, and nothing else I could do. He's like, okay, that's what you want to turn in. Save yourself the trouble. Personalize your essay and be passionate. You should be excited about your future. So write something you're excited about. Or if there's something you strongly dislike, as long as it's kind of passionate, right? And with that, it'll stand out amongst the crowd. What I used to do when I was like in English 101, I would print out my essay and I would read it out loud. And if it sounded boring and lame, guess what? It probably sounds boring and lame to the other reader. So don't want to turn that in, right? Apply and submit your applications. I would say as many as you can. My first year here, there was one student that had so many scholarships that it was really hard to keep track of. She had 10 scholarships for like the 7 slots that we had in our computer system. So I literally had to ask my supervisor, hey, is there any way you can create like more slots in the system so I can add all the other scholarships? Well, this student got like $20,000 worth of scholarships for one school year. It was crazy. And it was really hard to keep track of. Believe me, the student's dad would stop by every once in a while and check, and he had a information release on file, so it was okay to give out that info. But to try to explain to him, okay, it looks like this one posted, this one didn't post, but this student had a ton of scholarships. And then that student that turned in the essay that was all over the place, that was a mess, the run-on sentences with the U. Well, that year we had a donor that said, hey, we really want to award 2 scholarships. We're having a hard time getting the 2 out. We usually only award 1. Can you please see if we can get 2 awarded? Well, guess how many applicants we got? 2. So by default, this student was awarded a scholarship, $2,500, and it was renewable. So just like that, $5,000. But put your best foot forward though. And then I wanted to kind of go over some scams because they are out there. But I think students are usually pretty good now about giving out some of this info, like your social security number. Definitely not a good idea to do that. I mean, if they're asking for it, just put a bunch of X's and maybe the last 2 or 4 of your social, but maybe even that's pushing it. And I think most of them aren't asking for that, but some I think still do. If there's no phone number to contact the donor, obviously that's way too easy to trace. So I wouldn't apply to that one either. Don't apply to any you have to pay for, because if you're paying for it, guess who the donor is? You, the student. And then there's no guarantee that there's winners. And that's one thing that I wanted to talk about there. If there's no proof of past winners, there's probably not going to be any future winners. That's one thing that I've noticed that donors do, is they like to post the pictures of their recipients and their on their websites, and just, you know, like, hey, this student who you might know, you might be in a class with, they were awarded a scholarship. So it's kind of, I think that motivates students, like, oh, I know him, he got a scholarship, cool, I'm going to try that, you know. So in closing, we did like a general overview of scholarships. I showed you the application and kind of walked through the process. We talked about scholarships outside of WVCA, and we went over a lot of tips that are hopefully helpful. And I'm hoping that after all this, you'll feel a little more comfortable about applying. I know some of you have already turned in your applications, and that's great. Just keep applying, keep, you know, spending that extra time doing that, because it's going to just make it a lot easier for you guys, especially if you're thinking you have to work full time and come to school full time. You don't have to do that. I did that, and it's no fun. You get no rest. But at this time, I wanted to kind of open it up for questions. Looks like the chat had a bunch of activity. Watch it stop has a. Do any of you have? You can unmute yourself if you want to ask a question.
I just wanted to touch on the over awarding. So I know a couple of us that got denied the last cycle that had got it the previous year, and I thought we had priority, but we got denied. Do you look at over awarding as one of your criteria? We
do, because sometimes, which is a bummer, and sometimes it's hard to catch until we get that scholarship come through. But some, especially with the Washington College grant changing their criteria, now pretty much if you're a Washington resident and a couple other things, you're guaranteed to get it. In the past, it was like, we have just a limited amount of funding and first come, first serve. But now with that one, if we send you the funds and then you get a scholarship and that put you over, you kind of have to repay that. And so we don't want to go through that for students. And we could always just use the scholarship. But if we can save your Washington College grant for, you know, later, because you have up to 5 years worth of eligibility for the Washington College grant. So
I can use that funding can be used towards the bachelor's degree or something, is what you're saying, use later on in your academic career?
Yeah, you could use it further. Yeah, that's what we try to avoid, is having to have students repay. We typically don't do that, but if that's the last option, then we just have to do it that way. So
Okay,
there is that over awarding. Hopefully you're not in that pool, and but hopefully you're almost to that point, though. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Tony.
You're welcome. Any other questions? I see we put the link to the scholarship, those outside scholarships. That's great, on the chat. So I would save those in your on your favorites in your on your internet browser. That way it's always on your mind every time you pop it up. You open up your internet.
Hey Tony, how heavily is the GPA weighted to be a recipient for the WVC scholarships, or does that depend on the award type?
Well, it does depend on the award, on the particular scholarship, because some require a certain level, and then you're also scored on how well your GPA is too. So that is taken into consideration. But it used to not be as much, and we kind of adjusted it. So now it's a little more even, if you could say that. Because in the past we've had like why did this student score so low? Oh, it was their GPA. It's really high, but the way we had the criteria wasn't really reflecting on the quality of student that we were, looking at. So we bumped it up a little more, so it's worth a little more points. So hopefully that doesn't deter those of you that are, under 3.0 or whatever. I would say they still apply, because there's many that don't require a GPA, has to be a high GPA. We've made our scholarships a little more lenient over the last couple of years, especially with COVID. So hopefully that answers your question.
Yes, thank you.
So a couple of things that I've noticed through applying for scholarships. You talked about copying and pasting into a word processing program for the spell check and word check, punctuality, things like that. I've found it really useful to copy and paste the essay question into the document and then save my answers and my essays, because a lot of the essay questions are very similar, and you can go in and edit them to tailor specifically to the question, and all it does is create stronger essays down the road.
Yeah, whatever helps. I mean,
yeah, it's something that I've found that has helped me make my applications faster and stronger. And then something else too that I've found really beneficial, the scholarships I've been awarded were the ones that I talked about, like specific certificates I've gotten while I'm in school, such as like my word certificates, specific certificates I'm trying for through, before the end of my associate's degree, or through, my entire educational program. But also like your volunteer history, whether it's, volunteering in your kids' classroom, or, just little things like that, because they want strong citizens. They just don't want strong students.
True. Yep, that's right. I used to send out a notice just before Thanksgiving, because you could, if you don't have any community service, that's a great time to do that. There's lots of soup kitchens and places like that you can help out at, especially during the holidays.
Yeah, it's the little things that people don't consider as community service that really can be. Helping someone in the store that you see needs help picking something up that they dropped, or carrying something. You may not do a lot of community service, but those little acts of kindness matter.
Oh yeah, they definitely do. Yeah, great point. Any other questions?
Vincent, you had your hand up. Did you have a question?
Yeah, I just was kind of curious. I know that the AwardSpring, the process for me is kind of difficult with the essay part, but what I'm kind of interested in is who's all on the board. Like who are the people who actually sit and make these determinations as who gets awarded? And I just like to say thank you to whoever awarded me for one of the scholarships that I did receive. But I'm kind of interested in that process of what that looks like, how many people are involved, and who those people are.
Well, that's a little more confidential, but we'll just say it's a combination of the foundation, or the WVC Foundation, and faculty and staff.
Really? So you I guess the etiquette that we have with our teachers and the people at the school itself.
Yeah, they'll be like, oh, I know this student.
Yeah. Well, dang, that has a determining factor. And if, it's like, no. Well, thank you. That kind of answers my question, because I like the foundation itself, I don't know, like, the scholarship foundation, I don't know, like the names or the people. I'm not sure if I've met the people like that are actually involved in the process, you know.
Oh yeah.
So
yeah. Every year they have like a what do they use the term? The banquet, scholarship banquet, where they invite all the recipients and they have like a lunch with them. And that's a time where a lot of the donors, they'll have lunch there too, and you can meet the donors too.
really, yeah. See, that would be awesome. That would be awesome. I mean, because I was I can't remember the exact name, but the Teresa Stradler or Steinhauser scholarship, I was awarded that, and it was in memoriam. But I was kind of wondering more, like, you know, like some more information about that particular donor, like what, I don't know if that person had passed or if they're just a former student or,
oh, sure. Yeah.
you know, so I mean, because the way the AwardSpring is set up, you just apply and then it determines which ones you're, you know, that you can apply to on its own, which is really nice. But I would be really interested in doing an essay writing workshop, scholarship essay writing workshop, because that's one thing I'm working on right now is working on my essay part, like, you know, looking at it like this is a face-to-face, so to speak, with you. So I can, you know, if you were to ask me those questions, I could probably on the fly give them better than I could write them, you know? Yeah. And so that like, it's kind of new for me, but it's overall, it's a learning experience. So I'm trying hard to, because, you know, past WVC into the university, try to get those scholarship essays and the outside essays. This is kind of giving me like a little training ground to do that, but I'd like some more training, you know, if that ever comes up, that'd be nice.
Yeah, definitely.
And that actually goes into the second part of the presentation. We'll be going into a little bit of the writing and strategy behind that. But you bring an excellent point of just like knowing your audience and understanding that the committee is at any place, whether it's WVC or University of Washington or any of these board or foundations, they're looking at these candidates and they're reviewing these applications as an investment, right? Because they want to make sure when they award this fund or these monies, that this is going to go to a student who has demonstrated some ability to be successful in school, but will also continue to be successful in school and graduate, and then also make an impact in the community. So, you know, they want to see that money is going to be used for the greater good. So you have to think of it yourself as in that way too, that you are a product, but you also have to know your audience. And just like any product, when we're marketing, you know, there's certain things that line up that you're attracted to, or that you're like, you know, aligned with. And so that's kind of another strategy too, is to apply for scholarships that align with your values, with your vision, with who you are, so that when you write about these statements, or when you're writing to these, answering these questions, it's a genuine response. You know, it's not a boxed response, because they can tell. So, you know, if you're just kind of like cut and pasting and putting in general information, or not being, you know, transparent with what you're doing, it's just, you want to, they can kind of see that if they're getting like 10 applications that look the same. So just knowing that, just you want to know your audience, and you want to be able to sell your values, your passions, and so they can invest in you.
Yeah, great segue.
Yeah. But still, yeah, if you guys, we still have, if anybody has any questions, I'll give you just like a minute or two, but then we're going to go into the second portion of the workshop, where Jenna is going to present a little bit more about some of the, just like we said, just marketing and kind of projecting and putting in your information, so that way you are the best candidate for these scholarship and awards. So we will go into the second part. Tony, you're welcome to continue hanging out with us, or if you want to, you're also welcome to go ahead and stay in the presentation or check out. So
I think I'll stay. I'll
okay,
stay.
awesome, great. We love to have you. So Jenna, I think, all right, perfect. She's ready to go. I'm going to continue monitoring the chat if you have any questions. We also will have some sections in the end to also answer questions. So on that note, welcome, Jenna.
Thank you, Sandra. For those of you who maybe aren't in TRIO, my name is Jenna Floyd, and I'm the retention specialist for TRIO here at Wenatchee Valley College. So we're going to kind of start out doing a little bit of an overview of some of the things that Tony already talked about. And then we're going to go into some of the steps and kind of strategies and how to ask for a letter of recommendation if that's something that a scholarship requires. We'll go over some examples of short answer responses, and then we'll go into a little bit more in depth with essay or personal statements. So just like it has been, if you're welcome to unmute yourself or put answers or questions in the chat or anything like that. But we'll also have a Q&A at the end. So I'm going to start out just kind of jogging your memory a little bit about some of the things that Tony talked about. What are some components of a scholarship application? If you have a moment, maybe just throw some of those things in the chat here.
So we have goals and values. Take your time. Connections, part of like networking, and then educational accomplishments and need-based.
Yeah, those are all great. You guys have been paying attention. All right, so I'm going to kind of go over, again, Tony touched on a lot of these, but just to kind of make sure everyone's on the same page. They will usually ask for your basic information, contact information, kind of your background, to get to know you a little bit. They usually ask for some kind of financial information if you filled out a FAFSA or WASFA. Occasionally they might ask for a tax return, but again, if they're asking for your social, that can be a little weird. So that's something to maybe investigate, make sure it's not a scam. And then they might ask for your information and or your parents. So if you're a dependent student, they'll probably ask for some parent information. It depends on the scholarship, but that's something you might want to expect as well. If they're asking for a transcript, make sure you know if they're asking for an official or unofficial. Usually they are asking for official, and official copies do cost money. So that's something to keep in mind. Here at WVC, currently, the last time I checked, they were $10 each, plus there's a little bit of a service fee if you do it through Parchment, which I believe is what we're still using. So just kind of bear this in mind. If you're applying to a lot of scholarships that require transcripts, you might have to, fork out a little bit for the official transcript. They'll also ask you about your work experience, extracurricular activities, like students were saying earlier, if you don't have a lot of community service that you've done, there's things that you can talk about. If you're a freshman or even if it's your first or second year, you can sometimes pull from high school if that was recent. Just ideally, they prefer things that are more recent to show that you've been, actively engaged in your community, whether it's work experience or volunteer experience, but you can kind of pull from that as well. And then usually they ask you for some kind of written response, not always, but usually. So it might be short answer responses. They might ask you for an essay or two, personal statement, or some combination of these things. Some applications will ask you for a letter of recommendation. They usually ask for somewhere between 1 to 3. Like Tony said, give them the amount they're asking for. Some applications, if you give them 4 and they ask for 3, then they won't know which ones to read. They'll only read 3 of them, and who knows, maybe they're leaving out the best one. So just follow the directions and actually give them what they're asking for. But that being said, it doesn't hurt to ask for more letters of recommendation than you need, because then you can kind of pick out the ones that are the best or the ones that are most relevant to what you're applying for. And fill everything out that you are able to. Occasionally there are sections that just aren't aren't applicable to you, and you can leave those blank because they don't apply to you. But if there's ever anything that's optional and you have an answer for it, fill it in. We'll talk about this kind of when we get to the essay portion, but this stuff can make a huge difference. These can be times where you explain something that has no other place in your application, or just give some extra info that gives them something to, put out there. I see a question in the chat. Should we leave them blank or put NA? It depends on the application. So sometimes you can leave them blank. It doesn't hurt to put NA if that's an option. That way they know that you've read through and acknowledged it. So it kind of depends on the question and the application, but it doesn't hurt to put NA in there to show that you actually read and were thorough. That's a good question. So I'm going to shift gears a little bit and talk about some strategies for asking for letters of recommendation. So kind of just in general with everything I'm going to be talking about today, this information can be used for scholarships, and that's what we're focusing on. But if you're interested in transferring to a university or maybe even someday going to grad school, these strategies apply there too. So this is kind of some information you can put in your toolkit for life and keep with you as you move forward. It can even be helpful information for, applying for jobs and things like that. So when you are asking for a letter of recommendation, ask for references that are professional and that are relevant to what you're applying for. So if it's a scholarship, ask for professors or maybe supervisors if you've had good work experience. You can ask staff. For example, the TRIO team, we're here to write letters for our students. You can ask general employers, anybody who has some kind of professional capacity with you. I would not ask family, friends, people who just kind of know you unless they also have a professional component. And if it's a friend, that happens to be a supervisor or something, that's a little different, but you want them to talk about you as your supervisor, not your friend. One thing that I feel a lot of students don't necessarily know to do, but that really helps is to give the people writing your letters as much information that's relevant to your application as you can. So if you're planning ahead, especially, give them drafts or copies or outlines or anything of the questions that you're being asked. So especially if it's an essay, you can emphasize this is a draft, it's rough, but give them an idea of what you're talking about and maybe they'll learn something they didn't know about you. Give them a copy of your resume. And if you don't have a resume, start working on one. This helps them know other things that you're doing or maybe remind them of things that you've talked about. Again, as someone who works in TRIO, when I meet with students to do advising appointments, I don't always know everything that's going on in their lives. But if they give me a resume, I might find out, a job they had previously that we've never talked about that's super relevant to what they're applying for. So giving them a resume really helps your letter writer advocate for you and know a bit more about you. I also usually, when I have asked for letters of recommendation, I give copies of my transcripts or at least tell people my GPA. If you don't have a great GPA or maybe you've got some low points, you can make notes or highlight things and kind of highlight for the reference writer what happened. I know when I was in college, my dad had a heart attack one quarter and it looked really bad. So I just kind of wrote a note in the side whenever I asked for letters of recommendation. This was a really rough quarter. I'm trying to not emphasize this, and it just lets them know something happened. You don't have to give them personal information, but it tells them that there's kind of a reason behind those ups and downs. And the other thing I like to do is give them a statement about why you are asking them for a letter of recommendation. Why did you pick that professor or that staff member or that supervisor? That way they know all the things that you've done with them. We're all busy people. I don't remember everything that I've ever interacted with each student or each employee. So if you've done, taken certain classes from a professor, maybe you volunteered once or twice or did a special project, highlight all of those things to remind the person writing the letter and kind of do some of that mental legwork for them. I always recommend giving the people who are writing you letters as much notice as possible. 3 weeks is ideal, maybe 2 weeks, but after that, you're probably not going to get a great letter. We're busy, professors are busy grading and teaching classes, staff members are busy with our jobs, supervisors are busy at work. So kind of respecting that time and giving them as much effort.
So Jenna,
yeah.
if you end a quarter and professors offer to write a letter and then you tell them I'll come back when I need it, and then months go by, should we be accepting that and say, yes, write me one right now, even if we don't really need to use it? I can't see it being an asset if it's not really specific.
Yeah, that's a good question. It sort of depends. It doesn't hurt to ask, to accept it and then go back to them and say, like, you wrote me this really great letter. I'm applying for this scholarship. Could you maybe focus on this point, like take what you've written. It doesn't hurt to get that information, but it kind of depends on your relationship with the person and how likely you are to see them again and interact with them again. Yeah, it can kind of go either way. It is really good to make sure it's tailored to what you're applying for, whether it's a scholarship or, a transfer school or something like that. But maybe depending on how they write it, you might be able to use it. So like Tony said, maybe getting copies of those things so you don't have to go back. It's kind of similar. If they write one that can be applied to a lot of different things, then you can reuse them. But you kind of lose a little bit of that personal touch too. So I don't know, did that answer the question? I don't know if that's a really satisfying answer.
Yes, I got some good stuff out of that. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, it's a good question. It's kind of tricky. There isn't like a clear black or white answer for that kind of thing. Let's see here. So I got a question here in the chat. It says, does it have to be a recent letter of recommendation? That's kind of a similar thing to what we were just talking about. If you got a letter in high school and somebody wrote that for you and, maybe it's been a little while, you might reach out to that person again and ask them to kind of update it and say like, hey, remember me? This is what happened. Again, giving them that statement. I really appreciated that you wrote me this letter. I'm applying for this new scholarship. Would you mind giving me an update or something like that? So it's not that you can't reuse those old ones. And maybe if you only have a couple of old ones, that's the way to do it. If you need 3 and you can only find 2 current people, then that's a strategy. But usually you kind of want to be more engaged with that person now if you can. So if you've got 3 people now and they have, they're asking for 3 letters, I would go with the more recent ones. But again, it's kind of weighing. Maybe the person from high school knew you for 6 years and you volunteered for them. That's a lot of information they can provide for you. So it's again, kind of one of those not really black and white answers, but a good question. And then there's another comment in the chat, which is a great one. When you're about a week away, it's a good idea to touch base with the reference writer and make sure they haven't gotten busy and forgot. Absolutely. As a person who's written reference letters before, I super appreciate this. Don't be rude about it, but if you reach out and say, hey, how's it going? I wanted to see if you need anything else from me. Remember, the application is due this day, or, if you could get that to me by this date, I'd really appreciate it. It's a good reminder in case they have gotten overwhelmed and busy. Most of us, who are professionals, try to manage all these things, but sometimes things do fall through the cracks. So absolutely, that's a good recommendation. And if possible, meet with the person. If you, maybe over Zoom these days, or hang back after class if it's a professor, or just schedule a time and ask them, I'd really like to apply for a scholarship. And I'd like to talk to you about it if you have time. Can we schedule, an appointment? And then asking them if they can write you a strong letter of support. And I kind of emphasize that because a mediocre letter doesn't really do you any favors. If someone just kind of talks about you generally and that letter can be applied to anyone, then that's not really gonna do anything for you. So I always ask, I use language like, can you write me a great letter of recommendation or a strong letter of support or something like that? And just kind of using those words to emphasize to that person that you want it to be good and kind of special. And if they tell you no, maybe they'll be honest with you. If they don't feel they can, look at your options and see what you can do. If you have other people that can, write better letters, then do that. If that's your only option, then it's your only option. But At least you're asking and kind of putting that out there, and you know what to expect. So this is kind of an example of how I organize my letter as a recommendation in the past. So this is the information I take down when I am putting together a packet for somebody and who I want to ask. I write down their name, I write down their title. Like this professor I looked up again, and now he's emeritus, which is a fancy way of saying retired. So now I know I'm probably not going to use his work email or his work phone. He did give me his personal email, so if I ever want to reach out, I can do that. I just didn't post it here. So any information they give you, put it together and save that info, because you might need it in 5 or 10 years, depending on, you know, what your situation is. And then the why, I summarized all the stuff I did for this professor. I was looking back at this when I was putting this presentation together, and I forgot that I TA'd for so many classes, and I only remembered because I read these notes to myself. So having all these little things that you've done or interacted with, it's a helpful way when you reach out to that person to say, hey, hi, could you help me with this? I'd like to get a letter. These are the things that I've done for you. I will highlight, if it's a professor on my transcript, I'll highlight the classes I took from them and kind of just emphasize, I remember I took this class and I did this project that you graded, or something like that. Kind of just giving them a cue as to why that you're asking them, and reminding them a little bit more of who you are. So kind of looking ahead at the things that you're going to be writing, when it comes to writing a statement or an essay or answering these short answers, like Tony said, make sure you actually read and understand the question and actually answer that question. If you don't understand something they're asking for, ask other people. You can ask friends or professors or staff members. Just get other input to see what other people think they're asking for if you're confused. Because if you don't answer the question that they're asking, then there's a good chance you're just not going to get the award. Another piece of advice is to use the keywords that they use, because that tells the reader that you answered the question. So if they ask you, what strengths do you have? Maybe using the word strength somewhere in your answer just kind of helps take out some of that legwork of them trying to decipher it. It's usually a good strategy even when applying for jobs. So it's something to kind of keep in mind. Like Sandra said before, tailor your application to what the scholarship's mission is. So if it's, an organization stands for something specific or has a certain goal in mind, keep that in mind when you're writing your application or your essay, because you can kind of emphasize and focus on what their goals are. And everybody has something that makes them unique. So what is the thing that makes you unique? A lot of students will kind of tell general stories, and if those stories can apply to anybody, then it doesn't really do you any favors, because a lot of students can tell that same story, and they might in their application. I've volunteered to read some of these responses, and I don't know who these people are because they make it anonymous. But I should be able to tell who my students are if they're doing this right. So if I read a response and I recognize some content, if they're answering this question fully, I should know, okay, this is Stacy, and then I'll not grade hers because that's a bias. So it's just kind of something to focus on, that we don't know who you are most of the time, but there are people who do in the review process, but some people that are reviewing have no idea because they just take that information out, and we'll never get to meet you, whoever we're grading for. So the only way we know who you are is if you tell us and show us in your writing. Show your passion, speak about the things that you've done. So I'm going to focus a little bit here on a couple of examples of short answer responses and have y'all kind of contribute here. So when they're asking for a short answer response, they are asking for a short answer. A lot of them these days will just cut you off, and you can't type more than they're asking for. If it's not like that, I would still keep it to the word count, even if it doesn't cut you off. Copy and paste it in Word, see what your word count is, and stick to what their questions are asking. Did you answer the actual question or questions that they asked? And is this a true, genuine response? So I'm going to give a few examples here. I'll read these ones out loud since they're short answer. Post in the chat on a scale of 1 to 3, what score would you give and why? So 1 would be not very good, 2 would be, oh, you know, an okay score, and 3 would be great. So this first one, the question, this is an actual scholarship question from WSU. Like Tony said, a lot of these questions are very similar. So you might see similar questions like this at other schools and maybe even WVC. So once you do one of these, it's a good idea to kind of work on those responses. So describe your experiences having or witnessing discrimination. Tell us how you responded and what you learned from those experiences and how they prepared you to contribute to the WSU community. This question has a word limit of 110 words. I've been fortunate to not witness much discrimination, but I know that it exists. I believe all people should be treated equally. Let's go ahead and post in the chat, scale 1 to 3, what would you give this? 1 is not very good, 2 is kind of mediocre, but you know, all right, and 3 is pretty good. Yeah, so I'm seeing lots of 1s, a few 2s in there. Does anybody want to say why they get that response? You can either put it in the chat or you can unmute.
I would say the reason why is because they're like, and this is really great for me because it kind of looks out like I'm looking at myself to answer this, because that's kind of like what I was kind of like going towards, but it doesn't answer why they feel that way. You know, it does say a true statement of like, you know, I believe all people should be treated equal, but why is that? Why, you know, like it doesn't go any further into what they really feel. It's just kind of a broad, you know, all encompassing statement. But I think if they explain why they feel that way, it might be a little better. I don't know.
Yeah, that's a great response. Because the statement is really kind of just generic, and we can all identify with this. Like most of us believe all people should be treated equally, but that doesn't really tell you anything about this student or, you know, what makes
they
them
learn.
stand out. Yeah, exactly. What they learned is one of the things in there.
Or how they prepare to fix it or contribute.
Yep,
Those are the second and third parts.
It's just too short.
It needs to have a lot more elaboration.
Yeah, exactly. Like Tony said, you don't need to put just one sentence when they ask for 100 words. Use some of, you know, use that. Use this one has 110 words max. You don't have to use 110 words, but maybe put more effort in and explain it. Actually go through and provide an answer. Another thing I'd like to add, I've talked to other people who review scholarships at other colleges, and they've mentioned this too. Don't give a negative response like this, like I haven't, because everybody has witnessed some kind of discrimination. Everybody has contributed to their society. Everybody contributes to their community and has some kind of leadership experience. It might take a little creativity to think of how that has happened, but everybody has experienced these things. So saying I haven't doesn't really show that you've really put much thought into it. So that's another thing to think about. I'm going to move on to another one. It's the same question, but a different response. Earlier this year, I witnessed discrimination in a restaurant. When I was standing in line, the 2 women in front of me were speaking in Spanish to each other. The person in front of them turned around and yelled at them and told them they should be speaking English. He was very rude and they got scared. I spoke up and told the man that he should mind his own business. He rolled his eyes but stopped bothering them. I try to look for discrimination when I see it and speak up. I believe if more people speak up, we can make people feel more welcome. So again, in the chat, go ahead and put 1, 2, or 3, what you would give this response. Awesome, I'm seeing lots of 3s, a 2 in there. A couple more 2s. 3, great. Does somebody who gave a 2 want to tell us maybe why they didn't give it a 3? Again, in the chat or I'm muting. Go ahead, Vincent, sorry.
I gave it a 2 because I think that there's too much unnecessary detail, you know, that can be compressed a lot. And and maybe give detail why he believes or they believe that you should speak up more and what that would do to benefit the community. So it's just, I feel that all the extra detail in the beginning takes away from the concept or the idea.
Okay. Yeah, that's definitely a good thought about that I hadn't considered. Yeah. Anyone else? Maybe how he felt instead of what he did. Yeah, that's a good one too. So if I were reviewing this, I'd maybe give it a 2 or a 3. It's kind of on the fence. The main reason that I would maybe not give it a 3 is because they don't address the last part of this question. They don't specifically state how they're going to contribute to WSU. They kind of, hint at it, like you contribute to your community. But there's, maybe making it a bit more explicit. Again, it depends on who's reviewing. Everybody's a little different. So I think the story kind of helps and tells a lot, but some people might not feel that way and might think that it's a bit too wordy. So that's a good point. I've got one more short answer and then I'm going to move on to some essays while we have a few minutes left here. Last one for this same question. When weightlifting, people often correct my form even though I'm a trainer. I'm a small woman and often use modified techniques. When I kindly tell them that I'm doing a different move than they think, I'm often met with rude responses. I've learned from experiences like this that discrimination can be subtle, but still have an impact. I've used this information to reflect on my own judgments toward others. As part of the WSU community, I will contribute by being mindful of my words and actions toward others. We are all individuals and deserve to be seen for who we are, not who others think we may be. So again, in the chat, 1, 2, or 3, what you think? Yeah, great. I'm seeing a lot of 3s here. Again, I agree. I feel like this person more or less addressed everything. They did it in the word limit and did pretty good content here. Someone in the chat said she's specific in her details and how it tailors to her choices toward others. Absolutely. All right, so, oh, go ahead.
I'm sorry, just quick, just like it was a personal example and she reflected on it. So again, like it's just like that's a unique thing that she's a female trainer, she's petite. There's a lot of things that you captured from this short response that answered the question, but also gave a little bit of insight of who she is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. That's a really good point, Sandra. So in the last few minutes here, I want to give you a couple examples of some essays. So personal statement might also be considered an essay. It kind of depends on what they're asking for. Basically, they want to know who you are and why they should invest in you. So is this scholarship going to actually have an impact? Is this going to go to something or someone that has, potential and that's going to go somewhere, that's going to graduate and work in, a community? So what makes you stand out and what makes you unique? I'm sure a lot of us have heard this throughout the year, show, don't tell. Basically what this means is just give details rather than telling someone, I worked as a cashier, maybe explain some of your experiences as a cashier to kind of illustrate that story. Don't just list your qualifications because that's what you have a resume for, or, listing your grades, it's on your transcript. You don't need to state that again, but you can use that time to explain and elaborate and kind of tell a story. How did you get here? If you've had ups and downs, maybe family's been sick, or you've, overcome some barriers, or you just didn't take school seriously and now you do. You can explain those things and explain how you overcame those low points and kind of help bolster why your GPA might not be as great as you want it to be. We love stories. That's why, we have podcasts and TV and movies and books and everything. We love hearing stories or reading stories. So reviewers get kind of caught up in your story and it really helps. So I'm going to go through a couple examples here. We don't have a ton of time left, so I'm going to cut out one of these, but I'm going to have you read these. I'm not going to read them out loud because it's pretty lengthy, but we'll give about 3 minutes to read it and then just kind of put your response in the chat. These essays were winners from TRIO students in the past. So think about the things we've talked about today and maybe just explain in the chat why you think they won. So I'll leave it here for a minute.
So we're still rating these from 1 to 3 and then giving an explanation, you said, of why?
Yeah, you don't have to rate it from 1 to 3. I mean, you can, but maybe you can either put it in the chat or, you know, it's been a couple minutes here. We can just unmute and talk about it. So if anybody has any reason, basically, why do you think this person won their scholarship?
There was a lot of individuality, and it's very personalized and it's pretty strong and detailed.
Yeah, definitely. This definitely paints a picture. Which is what Stacy said in the chat too, paints a good picture of where their career ambitions began. I like this because this was a life-changing situation that gave direction and meaning to his goals and the path he chose. Absolutely. So I'm going to show a little bit here. This student won their scholarship, which is awesome. Jessie also mentioned she remembers that windstorm. I'm sure it was, I didn't live here in 2007, but it sounds pretty, from this story, it sounds pretty harrowing. So it's definitely something that had an impact on the community. So this student won their scholarship, which is fantastic. But one of the things I think that really carried them is, I've kind of highlighted here the parts that I think that they answered, and they didn't really answer these last 2 questions very thoroughly, but they still won. And really, if you have a good story, that kind of can carry you through. I would recommend making sure you maybe address these points a little bit more. But you know, this student got their scholarship, and they told a great story that had a lot of, you know, images and things that were conjured that really helped. I'm not going to go through this one, but if you're a TRIO student or if you fill out the evaluation, we'll send you the PowerPoints at the end, and you can read through and see what you think about that one. And then this one, I'm going to kind of just tell you what I think about this since we don't have a lot of time. This person wrote a very moving story, and they answered this question that was pretty much optional or that didn't have a lot of direction. So is there anything else you'd like to tell us in 300 words or less? If you just kind of don't really say anything, you could be missing an opportunity to really bolster your application. This student had a story about her son and being a first-generation student and balancing these responsibilities and kind of learning how to, you know, handle all of the different demands that they had and their feelings and emotions about balancing these responsibilities. So, you know, I read this and I was very moved. So I understand why this student won their scholarship, but this is a good reason to stop and think about what makes you unique and answer questions like this with some thought and detail. So Vincent already kind of brought this up that he would love to have a writing workshop. TRIO students out there, we'd love to host one if people are interested, where we can actually go through this together. Where we have an evaluation form here, maybe Sandra, if you can put that in the chat. we'd love it if anybody, whether you're in TRIO or not, if you fill this out, and if you do, we'll send you, the recap of this and slides and things. But TRIO students as well, let us know if you're interested, and we'll see if we have enough interest when we might do a writing workshop. And if you're not in TRIO and you want to learn more, you can find us on our website, wvc.edu/TRIO. You can email us, trio@wvc.edu. You can scan this QR code, maybe if you're looking at this on your computer, and that'll take you to our application. So feel free to reach out if you have questions.
All right. I think that's
This
it.
was very, very helpful. Thank you very much.
Oh, good. I'm glad. You're welcome. Thank you, Tony. We really
Thank you,
appreciate
guys.
your insight this afternoon. And yeah, really helpful.